Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Backbone Podcast, where common sense still makes sense in a world that is sick and only getting sicker. And today, it is officially, it really started last night, but we couldn't, we had to cover the sadness in Texas. But it is now, we're going to kick off Superman week. As you know, Friday, the 11th, July 11th, is the world opening of the new Superman film by James Gunn. There has been a lot of talk about it. Of course, there is because it's the Man of Steel. Superman is the most iconic superhero character in American history, and it seems to be certified fresh. People like it. We'll see. Now, I've seen on social media some people bitching and moaning about it. I've seen some people on social media loving it and raving about it. Go see for yourself. Go out this weekend and go with a bunch of guys. Don't take some broad. Go with some guys. Superman's a guy film. Superhero films are for guys, not for chicks. But we're going to review what I would say were 5 of the most important Superman films and shows of the last 50 years. And I'm not going to use the animation because the animation will be here all day. And DC animation is the best in the business. Their superhero animation movies are fantastic. The comic books are fantastic. Marvel, for some reason, beats DC in the movies because they just get the stars and they have the better writers and directors. Jon Favreau, of course, with Iron Man. The Russo brothers, of course, with Captain America and the Avengers. But DC always knocks Marvel out of the ballpark when it comes to the comics, TV animation, television, live television, and even video games. I'm not privy on the video games so much, but the video games, from what I've heard, are a lot better than the Marvel. But as you can see from the banner here, we're going to look at the great movie of my generation, a movie I saw in the movie theater when I was about 4 years old. And this was the Christopher Reeve interpretation of Superman the movie with the great Gene Hackman as the best Lex Luthor. This movie was tremendous. It was originally written by Mario Puzo, who, of course, wrote The Godfather. Warner Brothers, I think, owned it at the time, were not in love with Puzo's adaptation of this movie, of his screenplay. And that's when they hired Richard Donner to rewrite it a little bit and direct it, and he ended up making the first 2. Now, I don't know if they're going to boot me off for having this image here, so I might change it in a little bit. This is for informational purposes, of course. But if you did not see the first Superman, well, the Superman movie of 1978, it is tremendous. I think the only movie that really beat it out was Superman 2. Now, in Superman 1, we start off as the origin story, which they pretty much always do nowadays. We start on Krypton with Marlon Brando playing Jor-El wrapped in aluminum foil. And he's a member of the High Council, and he sentences right off the bat, they sentence General Zod, Ursa, and Non to the Phantom Zone. And this pretty much is the precursor to Part 2, right? They basically tell you, we're going to give you a Part 2, and we're going to have this. These are going to be the 3 nemesis to Superman in Part 2. But as they sentence and they send Zod into the Phantom Zone, Jor-El also warns Kryptonians that Krypton is about to die. The planet itself is about to die. And it's going to be destroyed by its giant red supergiant sun. And of course, this ends up happening, but not before Jor-El and his wife Lara send their only begotten infant son, sound familiar, by the name of Kal-El, in a spaceship to Earth. Kal-El lands after, I think it's about thousands of years of travel. He doesn't age, of course. He ages a little bit. He becomes almost like a 4-year-old, 3 or 4 years old when he lands on Earth. But his parents had died thousands and thousands of years ago. Kal-El lands in Smallville, Kansas, of course, and he's found by Jonathan and Martha Kent, and that's where the story begins. And they show glimpses of Clark Kent growing up as a teenager. We see him, of course, as a toddler picking up the famous scene where he picks up the truck because Jonathan Kent has a flat tire. And as he grows, Clark Kent discovers his powers. And Jonathan Kent, who was played by, Glenn Ford. Excellent casting in this movie. Played by Glenn Ford, tells Clark, you were sent here for a purpose. Remember that word. We always use that word, that P word, purpose, right? We always need one. And of course, Jonathan gives this speech right before he dies of a fatal heart attack. This is when the glowing green crystal from Clark's spaceship that was hidden in his barn begins to call to him. And this green crystal leads him to the Arctic, where when he tosses it, he tosses it into the ice. The Fortress of Solitude is created. And this, of course, is reminiscent of Kryptonian technology and architecture. And it ascends from the ice, and the hologram of his parents, Jor-El mostly, is revealed to Clark. And Clark's heritage, and he trains him for 12 years. And after that training, he emerges in the famous blue and red suit bearing the crest of the House of El, which we know as an S. Jor-El, much like God does to Jesus, cautions him against changing human history. You can help, but you can't dictate human history because Superman has the power to do that. So what does Clark do? Well, he becomes a bumbling reporter for the Daily Planet and Metropolis. Now, Christopher Reeve in this film, I'm going to change the image just in case I break some sort of rule with DC or Warner Brothers or whomever. I like that one too. Christopher Reeve, as you can see in this drawing here, portrays Clark Kent like in the comics to a T. I remember the first comic I read was a kind of a corny one. It was Superman versus Muhammad Ali, and if you can find it, it's not the greatest, but that's what kind of made me fall in love with the guy. And of course, I read the other comics as they came along. But this movie here really grabbed my attention, and it grabbed the attention of a lot of people. The special effects, the story, the origin story. This budget at the time was the highest budgeted film of all time at $55 million, which has got to be close to $200 million in today's money. Once at the Daily Planet in Metropolis, he's introduced and drawn to Lois Lane, who is the Pulitzer Prize winning reporter for the Daily Planet. And Superman makes his first major save when he rescues her from the helicopter. And of course, Lois Lane has the iconic line where Superman catches her and he says, "Relax, lady, I got you." And she goes, "You got me? Well, who got you?" Perry White labels him the Caped Wonder, and the myth, the story of Superman begins. Now, this movie, of course, introduces Lex Luthor, played by the great Gene Hackman, who tragically passed away recently, a couple of months ago. He discovers now again the whole point of Lex Luthor in the old comics in the old days was that he was this criminal mastermind who focused on real estate, which really doesn't work today. In this movie, they kind of switch him a little bit towards being a criminal mastermind terrorist because he steals missiles from the U.S. Navy or U.S. Army, I think, uh, and he's aiming he's aiming for the San Andreas Fault when he reprograms these missiles. Superman, of course, is going to interfere with this. So Lex Luthor thinks ahead because he's the smartest man in the world and identifies Superman's weakness, which is kryptonite. Lex Luthor retrieves some kryptonite and he traps Superman in his underground lair, which is in the subways of New York City. Metropolis. He reveals his plan to sink the western part of the United States to make his desert land prime coastal property. And by doing this, he weakens Superman using the kryptonite and informs him that he's misdirected the missiles set for Hackensack, New Jersey, to trick Superman. Of course, a woman always ruins everything, and Miss Tessmacher, who was played by the hot Janine Perrin, I think her name was, she frees Superman because her mother lives in Hackensack. And she sends him, he goes into space, and he sends, he catches the missiles and sends them into space, but he doesn't make it to the San Andreas Fault in time. And as Superman rescues everyone else, Lois Lane is trapped in the aftershock of this earthquake in her car, and she suffocates and dies. Now, Superman, of course, is distraught. He's enraged at not having been able to save Lois Lane. And Superman disregards Jor-El's warning against changing history. And he goes more into Jonathan's belief to pursue, to help others, to save others, to use his powers for good. And he flies around the earth. And if you remember this scene, it's pretty freaking awesome, and especially in those days. He flies around the earth so fast that he reverses time, and he makes time go backwards. And he prevents Lois Lane's death and the missile destruction. And he saves the West Coast and then imprisons Lex Luthor and his bumbling assistant Otis, who's played by, what the hell was that name? What the hell was that guy's name? Jesus. Oh, my goodness. Oh, it was Valerie Perrin, I'm sorry, who played Miss Tessmacher. Ned Beatty. Ned Beatty played Otis. And that was such a great film. I remember seeing it in the movie theaters. I said RKO Theater, and I think it was in New Rochelle. And the first script that Puzo wrote was about 400 pages combined, and it was a bit, as they say, campy. There were some cameo appearances, I think famously Telly Savalas, who played Kojak, if you're a certain age you wouldn't know that, appeared in it, and he had a famous lines of "Who Loves You, Baby?" Pre-production had initially started at the Cinecittà Studios in Rome, and they had construction sets up. They had flying tests being experimented, but they had to moved the film out of Italy because Marlon Brando had an arrest warrant on him for sexual obscenity in The Last Tango in Paris. The Last Tango in Paris was a very crazy movie that was made. Marlon Brando, it is believed, had sex for real with the actress that was there, and she was a very young girl at the time. So they had to move. He had charges against him, so he couldn't go to Italy. So they had to move the production to England, and that's where most of the film was made. I remember this film fondly. The scenes where he flies, the S on his forehead that I tried to have as a little boy. Of course, I had curly hair, so it didn't work too well. Margot Kidder was just right as Lois Lane. Lois Lane is now miscast and misrepresented all the time as more of a bitch than a hard-nosed reporter. Almost every Lois Lane portrayal now is she's just bitchy. And that's not how Lois Lane was in the comics. That's not how Lois Lane was in the early animation movies or shows, especially in the Justice League. It's not how she should be portrayed. Perry White was perfect. Jimmy Olsen was perfect. And as I said, the man who stole the show was Gene Hackman. He was fantastic. He was really Lex Luthor. Funny, great wit, tremendous delivery, just can't miss. This film is can't miss. And if you want to see a great superhero film, this is the one to see. And so we're going to be doing some reminiscing about Superman. We're going to look into Superman 2 tomorrow as we talk about the great Terrence Stamp, who played, in my view, the best General Zod we've ever seen. We see Ursa and Non, which we saw in The Man of Steel. Ursa was kind of a ripoff in that one too. I can't say ripoff; she's the same character, but it didn't have the same effect for me. I love The Man of Steel. I thought it was fantastic. Many people didn't. We'll do The Man of Steel on Thursday. Tomorrow we'll do Superman 2. I can't believe it's Wednesday already. Then tomorrow was Wednesday. Thursday we'll do Man of Steel. Friday I'm going to do, of course, Smallville, the TV show, which I loved. I will not be doing Lois and Clark because I thought that they made Superman out to be such a cuck in that show over the last 2 seasons when it mercifully ended early, that I will refuse to mention. That is not part of canon, if you ask me. But they followed the comics pretty close. And they did a wonderful job, I thought this was tremendous. As I said, the film was budgeted at $55 million. It made a box office clearing of $300 million, which is, I mean, you gotta think that's close to what, 7, 8, maybe 900 million today. And the music, of course, was by the great John Williams. And the opening was, if you ask any Star Wars fan, they would say that it was a copy of the Star Wars opening, of the S just flying out from below the screen to the upper part of the screen, and with the little elongated stretching of the S, which I thought was cool as shit. But Star Wars fans always try to say, "Oh, you copied us. You did that." No, just shut up. Superman is a unique character. He's the guy that started it all. Without him, there probably wouldn't be a Star Wars. But I think it's good that we take a break from all the terror and horrors of this world so far, and we finally have something cool to look forward to. And I hope that all of you see it, and I hope you all enjoy it. He is a tremendous character. The problem with Superman is, unlike other characters, he has to have a conscience. He's a Boy Scout. He's a Boy Scout he's the invincible Boy Scout, right? He can do anything he wants, but he doesn't. He can rule the world if he wanted to, but he doesn't. He can conquer the universe if he wanted to, He doesn't. He can punch holes into different dimensions whenever he wants. He doesn't. He can take anybody's girlfriend or anybody's wife. He doesn't. He's just a nice guy with superpowers. He's a great guy who could fly. I guess that's what makes him so special, but in this cynical world, it makes him boring. We'll see how the film goes on Saturday. I'm gonna that's when I'm seeing it on Saturday, maybe Friday. I'll try to take the kids on Friday, but I'm looking forward to it. I always look forward to his films. I just hope they do him a little bit of justice. And I'd like to talk about, if we get a chance during the reviews, the Kevin Smith story, true Hollywood story, if you will, of how he wrote a Superman version. And he pretty much started the whole crossover thing of different superheroes. Because back in the day, you have to remember something. Back in the day, Batman was in Batman's universe. There was nobody else. Superman was in Superman's universe. Captain America was in Captain America's universe. There were no crossovers when they made these films or TV shows. There was nobody helping Spider-Man. Kevin Smith was the first guy to really use comic books and cross over characters from different different characters into these movies, because these movies weren't written at the time by comic book fans. They were written by Hollywood writers, so they didn't understand that Batman and Superman worked together at times, or that Aquaman knew Wonder Woman, or that Iron Man and Captain America were kind of not buddy-buddy, but they knew of each other. Finally, in 1996 or 7, when they were going to reboot Superman, they hired Kevin Smith, who was a comic book geek like I am, and he wanted to implement this new system, this new strategy for comic book movies. Of course, Warner Brothers balked at it, and they made the terribly boring Superman Returns. I mean, the guy didn't punch anybody. How can he was a stalker. Again, they cucked him out. But that Kevin Smith idea, I believe, was discovered by Jon Favreau. I think he looked at it and he went to Disney when they hired him to make Iron Man, and he said, we can merge these characters together and people will love it. People will flock to it. This is speculation on my part. Disney and Marvel bought it, and they went in on it, and they have 2 or 3 of the biggest films of all time. The Avengers, the last 2 Avengers, even though the last 15 minutes were a girl power fest that made me puke, those movies were as close to being perfect. Not perfect. They were as great as you can get. And let's hope that this Superman film can live up to the hype. It usually doesn't, but let's see. Well, anyway, how do we leave you? Thanks again for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Be careful out there, my friends. Satan is always busy. Lex Luthor is coming for you. Superman is on his way, July 11th. Be there or be square. Be a man, have a backbone, because masculinity and common sense are worth standing up for. We'll see you later.